Hello, welcome to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Bright. Today we are discussing about the ascension of Elijah and the letter that he wrote to King Joram of Judah, which is found on Second Chronicles chapter 20, verse, verse 12. It says, "And a letter came to him that is mentioned is King Joram, from Elijah the prophet, saying," and it goes down like that. There is controversy concerning this letter. Many people, they say that how did Elijah write a letter while he was already translated, or while he had ascended to heaven? But today we want to unveil the truth concerning this letter, to see if Elijah had already ascended to heaven, or those are just speculations of people. Let's take note that Prophet Elijah was last seen rebuking King Ahaziah. That's Second Kings chapter 1, verse on Second Kings chapter 1. That's when the prophet Elijah was rebuking King Ahaziah. And let's also take note that the first year that Ahaziah started reigning was the first year that Joram started reigning. This is the same Joram whom the prophet wrote a letter to. So Ahaziah and Joram started reigning the first year, or the same year. Therefore, if they started reigning the same year, even though Ahaziah reigned for 2 years, or probably 1.5 years, then it is quite evident that the prophet knew Joram. Even though Joram was reigning with his father Jehoshaphat, but it's obvious that the prophet knew Joram. Let's also say that approximately when the letter was written by the prophet Elijah, when prophet Elijah wrote a letter to Joram, it was approximately 9 years or so after the encounter with prophet Ahaziah. So after encountering the story with Ahaziah, the prophet wrote a letter, I think 9 years or so, to King Joram. Therefore, it is evident that it can be that the prophet was still alive. Why? Because when we notice that, we see that on the reign of Ahab, the prophet of King Ahab reigned for 22 years, and the prophet Elijah only made around four or five appearances on the reign of Ahab. Therefore, it can be necessary that on a period of 9 years, also for the period of 9 years, we can take away the 2 years of the sickness, because the prophet wrote a letter and the king was sick for 2 years. So we can take away the 2 years also, and it can be 6 years or 7 years. So it is possible that the prophet wrote a letter within a period of 6 years silence. Then it doesn't defy logic. Also, it tells us that as we have already know, that the King Joram knew Elijah, and Elijah knew King Joram. Also, Elisha was the prophet who was anointed by prophet Elijah. Also, as you can see, that they were in the ministry together. But Elisha was learning from the prophet Elijah. We noticed that the prophet Elijah was teaching prophet Elisha to be his successor. We noticed that also, and we see that it was only on let's not on second Kings chapter 3, when the three kings went to war and Elisha was called there. After Elisha was called, they say that it is Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who poured water on the hands of Elijah. The term that is used as poured water on the hands of Elijah, it is yatzak. The original word is yatzak, but the very same word that is yatzak, it's used also on Second Kings chapter 4 verse 4, and we can find it on Ezekiel chapter 24 verse 3, and in Genesis it is used many times, but it is not all the times used as a past tense. Sometimes it is used as a present continuous tense. It is not always used as who poured. Sometimes it's who pour or who pours, like on Second Kings chapter 4 verse 4. So probably it might be true that the term might be used when they say Elisha who poured. Maybe it was Elisha who pours water, because as you can see, the prophet Elijah was rebuking, or the prophet was in the ministry but in the cities, even though he was not literally living in the cities, but he was focused on the cities, on the kings and those who were in the cities. But Elisha the prophet, as we can see later on his later staging, Elisha was probably focused on the schools of the prophets. As we can notice that even before the ascension of Elijah, on chapter 2 of 2 Kings, it tells us they came from Gilgal to Bethel to Jericho. We see that Elisha was moving. He was moving from the schools of the prophets, like when prophet Samuel set up those schools of the prophets. There was supposed to be a father of the schools of the prophet. When Saul went there, and on chapter 10, when Saul went there, and he said they saw Saul prophesying with the sons of the prophets, and they asked, who is their father? It probably meant that there was a father who was supposed to lead the schools of the prophets. So it doesn't defy logic to say that Elisha was the father of the prophets, or Elisha was leading the schools of the prophets. Also, let's take note that Elisha was anointed, but he was silent. As we can see, when prophet Elijah rebuked Ahab on the vineyard of Naboth, Elisha was with Elijah, but Elisha is not mentioned. Many a times, prophet Elijah did a lot of things while Elisha was in the ministry, and Elisha is not mentioned. That explains why on 2 Kings chapter 3, the prophet Elisha is there, is mentioned, is helping Jehoshaphat and Joram of Israel, but Elijah is not mentioned. They were working in the same ministry, but they were working differently. Sometimes the other one was working there and the other one was working there. That's why prophet Elijah is not mentioned. That's why only Elisha is mentioned on chapter 3 of 2 Kings. So we see it is quite evident that prophet Elijah wrote a letter while before his ascension, or some can say before his translation, because it was only a period of 7 to 6 years after his encounter with Ahaziah. And also, let's take note that after the ascension of Elijah, that's only people started calling Elisha man of God. But before the ascension of Elijah, while Elijah was still there, people didn't call Elisha man of God. They were just saying Elisha, who was a servant of Elijah. Elisha was a servant of Elijah. Elisha was learning from Elijah. And when Elijah ascended to heaven, people started calling Elisha man of God. Therefore, it is evident that Elijah was still alive when Joram was rebuked. The letter that Elijah wrote, it was a letter that he wrote in his physical form, and he wrote a letter to King Joram, because it doesn't make sense to say that Elijah had already translated, since we are not given the dates of the translation. On the translation, there is no clue on chapter 2 of 2 Kings. There is no clue whatsoever that shows us the king who was reigning or anyone, so that we can have a starting date to say that this is where we can start to see if Elijah was still alive, or if this king was reigning, then we know that Elijah was still alive. There is no clue of that. There is no clue that can tell us the exact year that Elijah ascended to heaven. Therefore, those are just speculations of people, and the truth or the real issue is Elijah stayed a long time after the death of Ahab, and after that Elijah wrote a letter to King Joram, and Elijah ascended to heaven. Thank you guys. Please subscribe. Make sure you subscribe. Thank you.